If you are working with a child who is not speaking yet or is struggling to communicate their basic wants and needs, then today's episode is for you. I am speech language pathologist Carrie Clark, and this is the Speech and Language Kids podcast. And today we're talking about our functional communication curriculums for speech therapy. So these are pre-made structured programs that help children learn to communicate their basic wants and needs. So this is we're doing a season of the podcast right now where we're going through each of our 6 areas of communication that we cover in our SLK curriculum. And we're going to go through each of the areas and talk about the different curriculums in there and the different resources and materials that we have available. So it's kind of twofold. So part of it is if you already have access to our curriculums, if you already have a subscription, this information will hopefully help you learn how to use it more efficiently and more effectively. But if you are not a part of our subscription yet, number one, it might help you decide if this is something that's right for you, but also just to give you some general information about how we approach working with children who are having these different kinds of challenges. So today is all functional communication, but you can browse through our other episodes and see which other areas we've covered as well. So today is functional communication. So that means our students, our children who are struggling to communicate those basic wants and needs. Maybe they're not speaking at all. Maybe they're only speaking a little bit. Maybe they're speaking with echolalia instead of single words. Maybe they're using gestures or signs or a communication device. There's so many different ways that children communicate, and we're going to talk about a lot of those today. And we're going to talk about how to match the supports and resources that we're giving those students and those children with their particular needs. And that's what our functional communication curriculums are all about. We have 4 different curriculums in this area, and I'm going to show you each of those and tell you about those today. And then hopefully you will understand these different pathways for how we can help children depending on how they're communicating. So let's jump right in. We're going to start off by just kind of describing who would benefit from using these curriculums or these pathways. So first of all, children and teens who are struggling to take turns or share activities with others. So sometimes just that basic interaction piece is what's missing, and we can help them learn to engage with other people. We can also help those who are struggling to express their basic wants and needs. So again, if they are not able to request or comment or respond or greet, those basic interaction skills that we kind of take for granted, if they're struggling to learn those, then we can use these curriculums to help them. Also, those who are repeating things that they have heard other people say, or they are quoting shows or videos that they've watched. This is called echolalia, and it is a method of communication, but it's often confusing for the listener because the things that the child is saying may not actually be what they mean. The words that are coming out are what they've heard before, but they actually have a different meaning. So we're going to help kind of guide you on that path if you have someone who's communicating in that way of how we can support that communication. We also can help kids who are having trouble following directions or following basic routines, and those who are maybe using some alternative means to communicate. Maybe they're using sign language or pictures. Maybe they have a communication device or an app, or maybe they're just using their behaviors to tell you what they need because that's the only tool available to them. So those are the students, the children, the teenagers. These are the individuals that we want to help with our functional communication curriculums. And I always say when we are looking at all of these different curriculums, all these different resources and possible skills we can work on in speech therapy, this is always where I start. I want to make sure that every child, every teen has a functional communication system, a way to get their basic needs and wants and needs met. And then we can expand to other types of communication skills. Okay, so this curriculum, along with all of our curriculums, these are structured plans that are already put together, already pre-made. There's materials, there's training videos, all of that is already in there. And they're structured in such a way that they can be used by anyone. Because when I designed this curriculum, I really wanted it to be a tool that the entire team could use, right? A speech language pathologist could be using this approach in speech therapy, but then the parents and the caregivers could be following up and using the same approach at home. Teachers and educators could be using these same approaches in the classroom and in other therapies. And what we end up having is this amazing, beautiful ecosystem where this child is supported in learning communication their way, because we're all on the same page. We're all using the same tools, and we all have a shared vocabulary of how we're talking about this that makes it not only easier for the child to understand and pick up on, but it makes it easier for us to manage as well. So this program is for everyone. As you will see, if you go into our curriculum, you will see that there are specific training modules for all of the different roles to help you figure out how to use these tools based on your situation. So I don't know that I said it yet. If you are looking to access this stuff, you can go to speechandlanguagekids.com. You can look on the menu bar on the middle of the website when you land there. There's our curriculums, and you can hover over that and go down to the functional communication. Or at the very top is a button for get the curriculums or sign in, so you can access those as well. Okay, so let's talk about these 4 different curriculums, and then I'll kind of dive into each one. We're going to talk about what kind of individual is best for each curriculum and kind of where to choose. We do have some screening tools inside our curriculum that will help you make this decision of how to choose which area to start with. But I will say sometimes it comes down to a guess. Sometimes we say, well, I think maybe this one would be best, and you start with that. And all we can do is just take some good data and pay attention to whether or not it's working. If it's working, great, we run with it. If not, we try another one. And that's what happens sometimes, especially with our early communicators, because they are so early in the process that we don't know how they will learn best yet. So don't beat yourself up if you don't feel like you know exactly where to start right away. But we also have our discussion board inside the curriculum where you can come in and ask questions and get support from me and my team as well. So without further ado, the 4 curriculums. Okay, so the first one is called Early Interactions. And this one is emphasizing just that back and forth connection between human beings. So we're not super worried yet about their words or being able to speak or not speak or any of that. It's more about the interacting and engaging with other human beings. So that's the first one. And I say first, not because it's sequential. We're not doing these in order. You are picking one that seems like it would be most helpful to move this child forward on their path. Okay, so that's one. The second curriculum we have is called First Words. And so what we know about human language development is that there are kind of these 2 main ways that we're seeing children develop language. The first one is one word at a time. And this is kind of I call it the traditional method, because this is the way I was taught in grad school. This is the way that we've been talking about it in the literature for years and years. It's, first they learn one word. By the time they can say 50 words, then they start to put 2 words together. It's that very traditional word learning path. There's also this other one that we're seeing, though, where some kids, and particularly kids who are neurodivergent, maybe who have autism, they tend to learn language in this other way, which is through echolalia, or repeating things that other people have said. And so we have 2 different curriculums, one for each of those groups. So the First Words is for kids that we call analytic language processors. These are those kids that are learning language 1 word at a time. And that's the First Words curriculum. We're going to teach them some basic words that they can use to communicate their basic wants and needs. Okay, that's First Words. Then the third curriculum is our Shaping Echolalia curriculum, and this is for our Gestalt language processors. If you've heard that term, we'll talk a little bit more about our GLPs here in a minute, but this is for children who are not necessarily saying 1 word at a time. They're giving you the whole script from their favorite TV show. They're repeating back things that they've heard you say to them. So those kids get a different set of strategies because they're not learning language 1 word at a time. They're learning it in these chunks. So we can lean into that and feed them some chunks that are helpful to them and then help them figure out how to pull specific words out of those chunks later. Okay? And then our fourth curriculum for functional communication is our AAC curriculum, also called augmentative or alternative communication. So this is for our children, our students, our clients who are really, really struggling to get spoken words out, but they've got a lot in there to say. And we want to give them a way to communicate their words that's something other than spoken speech. Not to say that they will never speak, but that right now, their mouth is not a reliable method for getting those words out. So we want to provide them with some alternatives so that they can tell us what they need, tell us what they want, reduce that frustration for everyone involved, and then we can work on the spoken words. Okay, so let's come down to the early interactions curriculum first. So I'm going to walk you through each of the curriculums. I'm going to tell you what are some signs to look for that they might be appropriate for this curriculum, and then we'll talk about the 3 levels. So in addition to choosing a curriculum, you're then also going to choose what level of the curriculum you think is a great starting place for them. And again, all of this is inside our curriculum platform. We have tools to help you figure out where they are and where they need to go. But here is early interactions. Okay, so this is for children who are maybe not allowing other people to take turns with them in their play. So they play solitary, they do not engage with others. Maybe they don't pay attention to others who are trying to interact with them. They may not respond to others or turn when their name is called. So if you say their name, they don't turn and look at you. They may be struggling to follow one-step directions or multi-step directions. They may struggle to follow and participate in familiar routines. So, every morning we get up and we get dressed and they are fighting us every bit of the way. And they are, we say, oh, give me your foot so we can put that sock on, and they don't understand and they're getting frustrated. We can help with that as well. We also sometimes see that these children are struggling to handle new routines or changes in their routine. When they can't communicate what they want or need and they don't understand what's happening around them, it can be very, very challenging for them to handle change. So those kids as well. We also have on here that maybe they do not answer simple questions such as yes/no questions, or do you want this or this, giving them choices. And they may not be engaging in early social routines like peekaboo, high fives, and greetings. Okay, so again, this curriculum, this early interactions one, is all about helping them begin to engage back and forth with other human beings. So here are our 3 levels that we have for this curriculum. So beginner level is building awareness and engagement. So for all of these, I have ages written down in terms of what is a typical age range where we start to see these skills emerge in children. That does not mean that you cannot work on them with older children. Most of our kids who are in speech therapy for functional communication are older than these levels because they have missed those milestones and we're wanting to go back and support those. So the ages are really here to just make sure you're not working on a 10-year-old skill with a 2-year-old, but I'll give you those age ranges as well. So for our building awareness and engagement, we're looking at this is starting to happen about 9 to 15 months for a lot of kids. So this is being able to respond to their name when their name is called, being able to share joint attention, meaning if I'm looking at something and you're looking at something, we're both attending to it at the same time. And then some basic turn taking. So those are the skills we work on in the beginner level of this curriculum. Then we have our intermediate level, which is understanding and responding to communication. So this is ages 1 to 2 years and beyond. So now we're going to get into following some basic directions, answering yes/no questions, and making a choice between 2 objects. And all of this can be done non-verbally, non-speaking. So if they're not speaking yet, we can still be working on these engagement activities by having them maybe shake their head or nod their head for yes/no, point to the choice they want, or even just reach for it and grab it. So it's still engaging, but maybe not with words yet. And then at our advanced level for this one, we're looking at expanding the social participation and interaction with others. So that's ages 1 to 3 years and beyond. And some of the skills we'll work on at that level are participating in early social routines, increasing in interaction length, maybe taking a couple turns back and forth, and then answering WH questions. So now we're finally getting to some of those verbal responses as well. Okay, so that is the 3 levels for that early interactions curriculum. And like I said, all of the therapy materials are inside the curriculum. I'm not going to go into what each of those looks like because we would be here all day. But there is that 7-day free trial. So you can hop in there and check out those materials and see if those are what you're looking for. But that is one path that we could take to supporting a child who's not speaking yet. Okay, so that's the first one. Now let's look at the first words curriculum. So again, this is for our analytic language processors, meaning those students who are learning language one word at a time. So some signs that they might be right for this curriculum would be if they are using some single words to communicate, like milk or ball or go, as opposed to using a long memorized phrase or script, okay? We also may see a gradual buildup of vocabulary. They should be learning language one word at a time instead of repeating those whole scripts. They may even be attempting to combine 2 words together to make short phrases as their vocabulary grows, like want cookie or big truck. And they are not relying on echolalia or repeating scripts to communicate. Okay. Now I know that sounds really simple and like straightforward, but it's usually a lot harder than that to figure out how a child is developing language, because a lot of times their language kind of all sounds like jibber jabber, and that's very normal for both types of learners. So it's okay to say, okay, we're going to try this for a little while and see how they do. Or it's also okay to try a little bit of both and just watch them to see which approach they respond to better, because they probably will respond to one more than the other. The other thing to note here is that some kids are dual language learners, which mean they do both. So don't beat yourself up on trying to choose the perfect curriculum. It's more about trying strategies and paying attention to what works based on observations and interactions with the child. Okay? So our 3 levels for this one. We have our beginner level is encouraging first words. So we're going to model some language in ways that support language development in this manner. And we're going to do some vocab building activities. Okay, those are all laid out in the program. After that, we get to the intermediate level. This is our ages 1 through 3 years. And now we're actually trying to get them to produce some early word shapes. So we want them to be imitating short words. We like to start with easy words to say, like these up here, no, go, and whoa. Those are all really short words. They're easier to say, and we can use them in a lot of different ways. If we teach them cookie's really only helpful if there's a cookie present, right? But if I teach them go, I can use go anytime we're moving, anytime we're going somewhere, anytime a toy is moving, anytime there's any sort of movement involved, we can use go, right? So there's a lot of different, we call these core words, or words that are functional in their everyday life. And we choose the ones that are shorter first to make it easy to say. And those are the ones we're going to start with. Now, I will say sometimes we have kids who are not able to imitate words yet. And so we might start with imitating actions or sound effects just to get them in the habit of imitating. Oh, that's what she wants me to do. Okay. And then we move towards having them imitate words. So that's an option here as well. Then we get to our advanced level, which is expanding their vocabulary and learning to combine words. So this happens at the 1.5 to 3 year range. And so first we're going to build that expressive vocabulary of 50 words. We want to get to that 50 word mark with these little ones. And what that does is it allows us to have enough words that we can start pairing them together to make short phrases. So the key here is it can't all be nouns, right? Because ball milk doesn't really do much for me. But if I have some verbs and some adjectives and some different types of words, then I can combine them together to make some short phrases. And then we gradually build that up over time. And we have more resources for the next phases in our language curriculums. But this stops at just getting a functional vocab, a functional communication. Okay? So that is our first words curriculum. And then the other one that we have that's similar but with a different approach is our shaping echolalia curriculum. So this is for our Gestalt language processors. And Gestalt is the German word for whole, which means we're just learning language in these chunks called gestalts. And it's kind of just a different way to look at language development that reflects what we see some children doing. And so these children may be speaking in full phrases or scripts that they've heard before. Maybe it's from a show, maybe it's something that their parent has said, something a teacher or a peer said. They kind of latch onto these phrases or sentences and they use those over and over again, or they use them out of context. And so that's kind of how they're learning to talk, is that it's not necessarily about what the words mean, it's about what that whole chunk means to them. They will also tend to use melodic speech with varying intonation, even if they don't have super clear articulation, even if the speech sounds aren't clear. So a lot of times what this sounds like at first is, and so they're more interested in the melody of what it sounds like than the actual speech sounds. And so it's almost like they're tuning into a different piece of the speech than we are. And so sometimes what we have to do is play a little detective, and we might be able to recognize the melody of what they're saying in terms of, oh, that sounds like what that one character says on that TV show, even if the speech sounds aren't totally there. And along those lines, it may sound like they are speaking gibberish with lots of emotion and intonation variability. This is often what their speech sounds like first before they get those speech sounds in there. So you can listen for that. They will also repeat phrases the same way every time they say it. So for example, they might say, "Do you want it?" Because that's what they've heard us say, instead of saying, "I want it," or "Give that to me." So they're repeating things the same way. A lot of times these kiddos love patterns, okay? They're looking for patterns. They're trying to make sense of the world around them. So they love songs, quotes, categories like numbers and letters and shapes, things that are predictable and make sense to their brains. They love those things. And so again, we can give them different strategies if we know that's what their brain is seeking. Oh, you're seeking patterns? Heck yeah, I can help you with patterns. We got patterns all around us. We point out the patterns, and that's how we engage, and that's how we help them learn, right? Let's see. They like to play the same way every time. So they might reenact scenes the same way over and over again. And they may get upset if someone tries to change that play or change the routine. So maybe they like us to play house, and mommy sits here and daddy sits here, and then I bring the food, and we cannot deviate from that routine, and we cannot change the order, and you cannot sit in the other seat. You have to sit here because this is your spot and this is your spot. So a lot of times these kids, again, they're looking for patterns, and this is how they're making sense of the world around them. And if they don't have another way for them to communicate to us, then this is all they've got, and they cling to that. And so they tend to get pretty rigid on some of those patterns. Okay, so let's talk about the phases for our Gestalt language processors then. Our first phase is to simply help figure out what they're trying to tell us. So we're looking for the meaning of their echolalia, the phrases they're already saying, and then modeling more gestalts or chunks for them to imitate. So instead of trying to get them to say single words, we know that they want to use these long phrases, so we feed them phrases that would be helpful to them. So things like, "Let's go outside." That's a chunk that they could learn, that they could use anytime they want to go outside, right? And so we're modeling those gestalts, but we're also looking for the meaning in the echolalia that they're already doing. And remember, it's not always about what the specific words say. So if your child says, "Do you want to build a snowman?" chances are they don't actually want to build a snowman. Maybe they want to watch the movie Frozen. And so being able to tie meaning to these chunks or these phrases, this echolalia, can help us connect with our child and show them, hey, I understand what's going on inside your head. Because if we can build that bridge, they're going to be more likely to respond to us as well. So that's the first phase. Then we work on what's called mitigated gestalts. That's our intermediate level. So that means we're going to start breaking down these longer phrases into shorter chunks and seeing if we can use those shorter chunks to recombine with other shorter chunks and make new sentences. Okay, so if I've taught them, let's go outside. And I've also taught them, I want to eat lunch. Well, now we could mix and match, and maybe I could say, I want to go outside. And so we can start creating new combinations. So we're breaking down the longer chunks into pieces that can then be rearranged and mixed and matched. And then the advanced level for this one is developing self-generated language. And so we usually see this in our Gestalt language processors somewhere between the age of 3 and 7 years. They tend to get to this phase a little bit later than our first words kids, just because of the way they're learning the language. But eventually they get to the point where they can pull a single word out of one of those larger scripts and then start combining those single words back together. So now it's looking more like our first words kids who had started with a single word and then built 2-word utterances. But it takes us going through this first initial part of using these larger scripts and then breaking those down into smaller chunks and then pulling out single words, and then we build them back up. Okay? So that's our Shaping Echolalia curriculum for Gestalt language processors. Okay, last one for our functional communication is our AAC, or our augmentative alternative communication. If a child is already using some sort of a communication system, pointing at pictures, pushing buttons on an AAC app, any of those types of systems, we can use this curriculum to help them learn how to use their system efficiently and to communicate functionally. But we also might consider this if we have a child who is using gestures or behaviors or both to express what they want and need because they're not able to speak. Maybe they're using sign language. They've picked up on some sign language and we want to give them some more tools. Maybe they can point to pictures. But any child whose speech is very hard to understand and they're making slow progress towards intelligible speech. This can be especially effective and helpful if they are getting frustrated because they're not understood and they seem upset that they're not speaking like other kids. And so if we're seeing these things, then sometimes it can help to just provide them some sort of alternative method of communicating their wants and needs. Get them something where they can communicate right now while we continue to work on speech or other communication methods, but just allowing them to have a way to just let us know what they need. Can you imagine if you lost your voice and you had no way of communicating with the world around you? It would be so frustrating. So we can reduce that frustration for them and us by providing them some sort of communication system and then seeing where we can go from there. Okay, so our levels for this, we start off by using some sort of AAC for basic communication. We're going to model some core vocabulary words, and we're going to use those words to communicate those basic wants and needs. This can happen in so many different ways, and we talk about that inside our curriculum. There's some courses to help you figure out which methods would be best. Like I said, there's devices, there's picture boards, there's sign language. There's so many different ways we can use to help a child communicate, and we can find a good match for that child and that family too. Once they've got some basic communication on the AAC system, then we want to expand it to be able to communicate for different reasons. We want them to be able to say no and stop and reject something. We want them to be able to ask for more or ask for something to happen again. We want them to be able to say action words, either to request or comment or talk about something that's happening. We want them to have some descriptors, some possessive words, some locatives, some self-advocacy words. There are so many different things that kids communicate throughout their day, and we want them to be able to use their AAC devices to do that. And then beyond that, we start to expand to use that AAC throughout their day, expand their language skills. A lot of times what we see with these kiddos is if they're not able to speak yet, but they have all the words in their head, they're not getting a chance to practice building sentences and elaborating on thoughts and telling a story because those words are all trapped in their head and not coming out through their mouth. And so if we can give them a way to practice with words on a device or on a picture board, then by the time their mouth catches up, their brain is ready to get those sentences out. So we're kind of giving them a shortcut too. Okay, so those are the 4 curriculums for our functional communication. I hope that is helpful to you, where you can start to see that there are these different paths that we can take kids down. And that doesn't mean that it's one size fits all, right? Because it never is. But within each of these curriculums, you see that there's multiple levels. Within each level, there's different skills that you can work on to support that level. And so our program is structured, yet still fully customizable. You can tailor it to exactly what the child needs. We also have those, we have all the therapy materials in there. We have our courses. We have our AI-powered material generators. So you get all of access to all of that within our curriculum platform. And that is, you can find that at speechandlanguagekids.com, and you can see what all the options are there. But also, if you have any questions, let me know. You can email me at Carrie@speechandlanguagekids.com, or you can just hop in. We've got a free 7-day trial for our curriculum. So hop in, and then you can ask questions in the discussion board and get our community support as well as me. So hopefully that's helpful, but let me know what questions you still have. And we've got 3 more podcasts coming in this season. So next up is social communication. We're going to talk about our social communication curriculums, and then we'll hit fluency and voice as well. So hopefully this is helpful. All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next episode.